In my last video, I covered the U.S. defense of the Philippines in 1941 through 42. So let's cover this from the Japanese perspective and what they thought about the U.S. and Filipinos who were fighting against them. So what I'm going to cover today comes out of the U.S. Army Intelligence Bulletin dated from 1943, Volume 2, Number 1. All these are online if you go to the Fort Leavenworth Library online. They're all there free. So don't do what I did. There's multiple places that sell these online, but if you go to the Leavenworth Military Library, they're all there, once again, completely for free. So Section 4 of this bulletin covers Japanese comments on resistance in the Philippines. So I'm just going to read through this for you real quick and make a few comments. Introduction. An official Japanese Army document recently acquired and translated described in some detail the fierce resistance put up by the American and Filipino forces in defending the Philippine Islands. The document, dated March 1943, apparently was written for the benefit of Japanese units expected to face U.S. troops for the first time in other theaters of operations. Except for editorial changes, the document is reproduced below in the same form as the original. So, the document, Fighting Spirit. The fighting spirit of the U.S. troops was unexpectedly high. Before our troops, the Japanese 48th Division, if you remember, those were the ones who landed at Lingayen Gulf, landed on the Lingayen Bay. They fought a tough battle with the Americans at the waterline. We finally won, but only after the enemy had attempted to annihilate us completely. Notice the Japanese did not say decimate or anything less. They're saying that the Americans, which I am sure they're meaning the Filipinos, our allies, attempted to annihilate them completely. Remember, the 71st, 12th, and 13th Philippine regiments were up there, and only about a third of those regiments escaped. But apparently did some very good work during their defense. After we had attacked Manila, we expected the Americans to surrender after a suitable time, after they had been fought enough to save the reputation. However, continuing resistance on Bataan Peninsula, the enemy troops unexpectedly tried a strong offense. So, once again, the Japanese were very surprised that we continued to fight even after the Japanese had seized Manila and had pretty much attained all their gains except for capturing Manila Harbor. At the time of our second all-out attack on Bataan, we thought the U.S. forces might surrender if we broke through their frontline position. However, they did not stop resistance until the last stage of the fight. Remember, when the Japanese brought in the 4th Infantry Division, they were on the outskirts of our 3 hospitals down at the Marivelas, and then we only gave up until then. We thought they would give up when we occupied the Bataan Peninsula, but they continued fighting under our successive artillery and air bombardment at Manila Bay. Also, on Corregidor Island, they executed several counterattacks before they were pressed into the entrance of the island's main base. They're talking about Malinta Tunnel. They finally surrendered when everything was exhausted. The main reason why we won was because we landed a few tanks at a time and the Americans had no anti-tank guns which to oppose us. So, hey, they were the Japanese were actually pretty impressed with our fighting spirit of us and the Filipinos. So I guess not, we may have lost, but at least we impressed our enemies, so had that going for us. Command and control. We admired the manner in which the Americans, under difficult conditions, commanded the Philippine forces until finally forced to stop resistance. According to prisoner notes taken during the Bataan operations, there were many U.S. commissioned officers who bravely led native forces to the front lines. The rumor that only Philippine forces were used the front lines is all false, because the Americans and Filipinos fought side by side. Once again, the Japanese were quite surprised about how well the Filipinos fought along with the American officers who helped lead them. Regarding tanks, as a general rule, U.S. tank units moved forward bravely. In the vicinity of Carmen, a certain U.S. tank officer covering the retreat of enemy forces resisted to the last, was taken prisoner with a mortar wound. I don't believe it was a mortal wound. I believe it was a mortal wound on the Bataan Peninsula. Ours, the Japanese 16th Division, suffered heavily from enemy tanks which moved through the jungle. So even though we had not perfected tank and infantry tactics at this time, the tanks, often operating by themselves or in small detachments, really played havoc with the enemy. The front armament of U.S. tanks is so thick our rapid-fire bullets do not penetrate. Also, the movement of enemy tanks was much superior to ours. So the main Japanese tank used in the campaign was the Type 95 Hago. It was actually pretty equal to the American Type M3 light tank. However, it had a slightly less horsepower diesel engine, which apparently was not the standard of our gasoline engine and our M3 light tanks. Regarding weapons and vehicles, U.S. rifles proved superior to ours. The enemy's automatic rifle was used very effectively against us. Soldiers equipped with the automatic rifle carried a large amount of ammunition. The Americans have many different types of vehicles which are strong and superior. They transport all their weapons via vehicles, of which there are many special kinds. So here I think they're talking about our 75 millimeter self-propelled guns, of course our tanks, and any other vehicles we use to transport weapons with. And finally, training. According to reports from northern Tangan, native troops held rifle practice on the river lines prior to the invasion. We concluded that this training was very good because their shots were very effective all during the battle in that area. So, weapons, especially rifles, are not unknown in the Philippines. Being a Commonwealth United States at this time, they, like us, they admired guns, so it was not unusual for a native Filipino to have a rifle or a shotgun for hunting or home defense of their home. So most of the Filipinos were quite accustomed to handling firearms, and they did do some rifle training before the Japanese invasion. So I guess what we can take from this was no easy fight for the Japanese. They expected a very short fight. They expected to defeat us north of Manila. Then they expected to defeat us once we took Manila. Then they expected to defeat us when they took Bataan. And they only defeated us when we finally surrendered at Corregidor. So hats off to our guys once again who fought in the Philippines in the 1941-42 campaign. You were hitting above your weight, and you did a very admirable job in fighting the Japanese for so long. All right, so I hope everybody has enjoyed this video today, and I hope to be putting together more videos later. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.